A billionaire CEO invited his maid on a date as a joke, but she arrived looking like a goddess. And from the second she walked into that ballroom, his whole world flipped upside down. He thinks she's a stranger, a mystery woman who suddenly becomes the obsession of the entire city. Cameras flash, rumors explode, and everyone wants to know, who is the goddess who stole the billionaire's heart? But here's the twist. She's been right under his nose every single day, cleaning his floors, picking up his coffee cups, hiding a truth that could shatter everything he thinks he knows. When the media goes wild and the search for the mystery woman takes over his life, one secret could ruin them both. So what happens when the man who mocked her falls in love with the woman he never truly saw, and finally discovers they're the same person? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The early morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Damon Graves's penthouse, casting long shadows across the pristine marble foyer. Isla Bennett moved her cleaning cloth in small, careful circles, making sure every inch of the expensive stone gleamed. The oversized uniform she wore hung loose on her slim frame, and she adjusted her thick-rimmed glasses with the back of her wrist, careful not to smudge the lenses. The quiet of the morning wrapped around her like a familiar blanket. These early hours were her favorite, before the bustle of the day began, before she had to shrink herself even smaller in the presence of others. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, as it often did during these solitary moments. "Hold your head high, baby girl. Your worth isn't in what others see." The memory brought a fresh wave of grief, and Isla blinked rapidly, focusing on the repetitive motion of her work. At exactly 7:30, Mrs. Rodriguez, the head housekeeper, gathered the staff for their morning briefing. Isla stood at the back of the small group, listening as tasks were assigned and schedules coordinated. "Mr. Graves has executives arriving at 8 o'clock sharp," Mrs. Rodriguez announced. "Isla, please handle the coffee service in the main conference room." "Yes, ma'am," Isla responded softly, already mentally preparing for the interaction. She moved efficiently through the kitchen, arranging an elegant selection of breakfast pastries and preparing the expensive coffee maker that cost more than she made in 3 months. At 7:55, the sound of confident footsteps echoed through the hallway. Damon Graves strode into the conference room, his tailored suit as impeccable as always. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his jaw was set in a tight line that spoke of stress and sleepless nights. Isla noticed these details without meaning to. It was part of her job to anticipate needs, to observe without being observed. "Good morning, Mr. Graves," she murmured, placing a steaming cup of black coffee at his usual spot at the head of the table. He nodded distractedly, already scrolling through his phone. "Thank you," he said, the words automatic and distant. The executives filed in shortly after, their expensive suits and confident voices filling the space. Mark Tillman, the CFO, arrived last, grinning and slapping Damon on the shoulder. "Morning, sunshine. You look like death warmed over." "Always a pleasure, Mark," Damon replied, dryly, taking his seat as the video conference system hummed to life. Isla moved silently around the room, refilling cups and clearing away empty plates as the board meeting progressed. The discussion centered around quarterly projections and market strategies, but then took an unexpected turn. "Speaking of public image," one of the board members said through the video feed, "the annual masquerade ball is coming up. Damon, we're expecting you to make a strong showing this year." Mark leaned back in his chair, a mischievous glint in his eye. "Yeah, Damon, who's the lucky lady this time? Or are you planning another solo appearance?" The tension in Damon's shoulders increased visibly. "The ball is hardly a priority right now. We have actual business to discuss." "Come on," Mark pressed, clearly enjoying his friend's discomfort. "Even you need to have some fun sometimes. When's the last time you actually went on a date?" The other executives chuckled, and Isla could see Damon's patience wearing thin. She moved to refill his coffee, trying to make herself as invisible as possible. "Fine," Damon snapped, his voice sharp with irritation. "If you're so concerned about my social life—" He gestured toward Isla without really looking at her. "I'll take her to the ball. There. Happy now?" The room erupted in laughter. Isla's hand trembled slightly as she set down the coffee pot, her cheeks burning with humiliation. She could feel their amusement like physical blows. The idea of someone like her attending their prestigious event was apparently hilarious. "Yes, sir," she said quietly, her mother's lessons in dignity the only thing keeping her voice steady. She retreated from the room as quickly as possible, their continued laughter following her into the hallway. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of tasks and duties, each one performed with mechanical precision as Isla tried to push the incident from her mind. But by early afternoon, sitting alone in the staff locker room, she couldn't hold back the tears any longer. She stared at her reflection in the small mirror inside her locker, at the plain face, the carefully straightened hair, the uniform that helped her blend into the background. "Why can't anything ever change?" she whispered to herself, wiping away a tear with the heel of her hand. Meanwhile, several floors above, Damon had already forgotten about the morning's joke, buried once again in endless meetings and emails. The invitation that had cut Isla so deeply was nothing more than a forgotten moment in his day, as insignificant to him as she was. Isla closed her locker quietly, straightened her uniform, and prepared to return to work. She had learned long ago that dreams of Cinderella moments were just that, dreams. Reality was about keeping your head down, doing your job, and trying not to let the casual cruelties of the world break your spirit. But as she walked back to her duties, she couldn't quite silence the small voice inside that whispered, "What if?" The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, creating patterns on the marble floor she had polished so carefully that morning. In a few hours, she would go home to her empty apartment, where her mother's absence still echoed in every room. But for now, there were tasks to complete, rooms to clean, and a mask of quiet dignity to maintain. The next morning dawned bright and clear over the city skyline. But inside the penthouse's grand ballroom, organized chaos reigned. Staff members scurried about with ladders and decorations, their voices echoing off the high ceilings as they transformed the space for the upcoming masquerade ball. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above as workers carefully draped silk fabrics between the columns. The sound of drills and hammers mixed with excited chatter about the upcoming event. Event planners clutched their tablets, directing the placement of elaborate floral arrangements and discussing lighting schemes. Isla moved through it all like a shadow, methodically dusting the ornate moldings and polishing the massive mirrors that lined the walls. She kept her head down, focusing intently on each task, trying to make herself as invisible as possible. The sting of yesterday's humiliation still burned fresh in her mind. No, the ice sculpture needs to be centered exactly between those two pillars. Damon's voice carried across the room as he gestured to the workers. He stood with the head event planner, reviewing details on an iPad, while pointing out various locations around the space. His expensive suit and commanding presence drew every eye in the room, except Isla's. She turned away whenever he passed near, busying herself with some detail that required her attention in the opposite direction. If Damon noticed her obvious avoidance, he gave no sign of it. He was completely absorbed in the preparations, barely acknowledging any of the staff as he moved through the space. "The lighting package needs to be upgraded," he was saying to the planner. "I want something more dramatic for the reveal at midnight. And check that the catering staff will have enough servers. I don't want any bottlenecks at the bars." The morning cleaning rotation seemed to stretch endlessly as Isla worked her way through her assigned sections. The usual comfort she found in the familiar routine eluded her today, replaced by a heavy weight in her chest that made every movement feel like an effort. When lunch break finally arrived, Isla slipped away to the quiet staff break room, hoping to find a moment of peace. She had just settled into a corner chair with her simple sandwich when Eileen Hart, the head housekeeper, appeared in the doorway. "Mind if I join you, dear?" Eileen asked, though she was already pulling out the chair across from Isla. Her kind face held a knowing look that made Isla want to shrink further into herself. "Of course not, Mrs. Hart," Isla replied softly, managing a small smile for the woman who had taken her under her wing when she'd first started working at the penthouse 2 years ago. Eileen studied her for a long moment as she unwrapped her own lunch. "You're not yourself today," she said finally. It wasn't a question. Isla stared down at her barely touched sandwich. "I'm fine," she murmured automatically. "Honey, I've known you too long to believe that." Eileen reached across the table to pat Isla's hand. "This is about yesterday's meeting, isn't it?" The gentle concern in Eileen's voice made Isla's carefully maintained composure crack. "It was just so humiliating," she whispered, blinking back tears. "The way they all laughed, like the idea of me at their fancy ball was the funniest joke they'd ever heard." "Oh, sweetheart." Eileen's face softened with sympathy. "People can be thoughtless sometimes, especially those who've never had to work for anything in their lives." "I know I shouldn't let it bother me," Isla said, wiping at her eyes. "It's just, I try so hard to do my job well, to be professional, and in one moment they made me feel like I was nothing." "You listened to me," Eileen said firmly, leaning forward. "You are not nothing. Your mother raised you to hold your head high, remember? To know your own worth?" Isla nodded, her throat tight at the mention of her mother. "Well then," Eileen continued, a determined glint in her eye. "I say you show up at that ball looking so spectacular they won't know what hit them. Mrs. Hart, I can't possibly—" "Of course you can, and I'm going to help you." Eileen's tone brooked no argument. "I used to work in fashion before I started managing households. I know exactly how to transform you into a vision they'll never forget. But I don't have anything to wear, and I can't afford—" "Leave that to me," Eileen interrupted with a warm smile. "I've got connections from my old days in the industry. Trust me, dear, sometimes the best revenge is simply showing up and showing out." For the first time that day, Isla felt a tiny spark of hope flutter in her chest. "My mother would have loved that idea," she admitted with a small laugh. "Smart woman, your mother," Eileen said softly. "She'd want you to hold on to your dignity and pride, wouldn't she?" Meanwhile, several floors up in his private office, Damon was reviewing the final guest list with Mark. "The governor confirmed this morning," Mark said, scrolling through his phone. "And the CEO of Merit Industries. That merger deal might actually happen if you play your cards right at the ball." Damon nodded absently, his mind already moving on to the next item on his endless to-do list. "Good. What about the security arrangements?" "All set." Mark hesitated, then added, "You know, about yesterday, maybe you should apologize to that maid. The joke was kind of harsh." "What?" Damon looked up, genuinely confused for a moment before remembering. "Oh, that. It wasn't personal. I'm sure she understood I was just trying to get you off my back about dating." "Still," Mark pressed, "it probably wasn't great for staff morale." Damon waved off the suggestion. "She's fine. Besides, I hardly even see her most days. Now, about the press coverage for the event." The day continued its relentless march forward, full of meetings and decisions and endless details requiring attention. By the time Isla finished her shift and headed home, The sun was already setting over the city. Her small apartment felt especially quiet after the busy energy of the penthouse. She moved through her evening routine mechanically, changing out of her uniform, heating up leftover soup, straightening the few photographs of her mother that she kept displayed. Finally, she found herself sitting on the edge of her bed, holding a worn velvet box in her hands. Inside nestled a pair of delicate pearl earrings, her mother's most prized possession, passed down from her own mother before her. Isla ran her finger gently over the smooth surface of one pearl, remembering how her mother had worn them to church every Sunday, head held high despite their worn clothes and shabby shoes. "Beauty comes from dignity, baby girl," she used to say. "And dignity comes from knowing who you are inside." Looking at her reflection in the small bedroom mirror, Isla wondered if she had the courage to be more than invisible, even if just for one night. The pearls seemed to glow softly in the fading light, as if holding all her mother's hopes and dreams for her. The staff guest suite was filled with afternoon sunlight as Isla stepped out of the shower, wrapping herself in one of the plush robes Eileen had laid out. Steam curled around her as she wiped the mirror, revealing her reflection. No glasses, no uniform, just her natural beauty beginning to emerge. Her dark curls, usually pulled back severely, now cascaded freely past her shoulders. "There you are, dear," Eileen said warmly, entering with a garment bag and several boxes. "Ready to begin your transformation?" Isla managed a shaky smile. "I think so, though I'm still not sure about all this." "Nonsense," Eileen replied firmly, setting up her makeup supplies on the vanity. "Now sit. Let's start with a little moisturizer." As Eileen worked, her experienced hands gentle on Isla's face, she told stories about her days working in fashion. "I remember dressing movie stars and socialites," she mused, carefully applying foundation. "But none of them had your natural glow, sweetheart." Isla sat quietly, trying to calm her racing heart as Eileen enhanced her features with subtle touches of color. A hint of gold shimmer on her eyelids, mascara to lengthen her already long lashes, a warm bronze to highlight her cheekbones. "There now," Eileen said, stepping back to survey her work. "Just enough to enhance what's already there. Your mother would be so proud to see you like this." Tears threatened to spill, but Isla blinked them back. "Thank you, Mrs. Hart, for everything." "We're not done yet," Eileen reminded her with a smile, unzipping the garment bag to reveal a stunning gold gown. The fabric seemed to catch every ray of light, throwing off tiny sparkles. Isla gasped. "It's beautiful, but are you sure it will fit?" "Trust me," Eileen said with a knowing smile. "I've been doing this a long time." The dress did fit, perfectly. The bodice hugged Isla's curves, while the skirt flowed elegantly to the floor, making her feel like a princess from one of her childhood stories. When Eileen helped her fasten her mother's pearl earrings, Isla had to fight back tears again. "Now for the finishing touch," Eileen said, opening a smaller box to reveal an intricate mask. Golden filigree swirled around the eyes, with tiny crystals catching the light. "Go on, try it on." Isla's hands trembled slightly as she lifted the mask to her face. When she turned to the full-length mirror, she barely recognized herself. Gone was the invisible maid who blended into the background. In her place stood someone luminous. "Oh my," she whispered, touching the mask gently. "Indeed," Eileen agreed, looking satisfied. "You're ready." Meanwhile, 12 floors up in the penthouse's main conference room, Damon was deep in discussion with potential investors. His perfectly tailored tuxedo couldn't quite hide the tension in his shoulders as he went through projection charts. "And as you can see, the fourth quarter estimates—" He paused as Mark slipped into the room, carrying fresh coffee. "Sorry to interrupt," Mark said, setting down the tray. "But the first guests will be arriving in an hour. We should wrap this up." Damon nodded, gathering his papers. "We can continue this discussion at the ball." As the investors filed out, Mark lingered. "By the way, I assume that Maid won't actually show up tonight. Might be awkward." "Of course not," Damon replied dismissively. "Maids don't show up to galas. She understood it was just a joke." But something in his tone seemed uncertain, as if he was trying to convince himself. The hours ticked by as the penthouse filled with elegantly dressed guests in elaborate masks. Music drifted up from the grand ballroom, along with the buzz of conversation and tinkling of champagne glasses. In a quiet hallway away from the crowd, Isla stood alone, her heart pounding. The mask felt both like armor and permission to be someone else, someone brave, if only for one night. "You can do this," she whispered, to herself, hearing her mother's voice in her head. "Hold your head high." Taking a deep breath, she stepped out of the shadows and approached the ballroom's grand staircase. The sounds of the party grew louder with each step. Damon stood near the bottom of the stairs, half listening to a conversation about stock options. The evening was proceeding exactly as planned. Controlled, predictable, profitable. Then something made him turn. Later, he would never be able to say what it was, a shift in the air, perhaps, or some primal instinct. But in that moment, as he looked up at the top of the stairs, everything else fell away. She stood there like something from a dream, gold dress catching the light like captured sunshine. The mask she wore only made her more intriguing, highlighting eyes that seemed to hold depths he couldn't fathom. As she began to descend, every movement was filled with a grace that drew every eye in the room. Damon's breath caught in his throat. For the first time in years, his carefully constructed world tilted on its axis, leaving him completely captivated by this mysterious woman who seemed to have stepped out of a fairy tale. He didn't notice his champagne glass tilting dangerously in his slack grip. He didn't hear Mark calling his name. All he could see was her, this golden goddess who had appeared as if by magic in his ordered world. The woman in gold reached the bottom of the stairs, and Damon found himself taking an unconscious step forward, drawn by a force he couldn't explain and didn't want to resist. The crystal chandeliers cast a soft, ethereal glow across the ballroom as Damon made his way through the crowd. His heart thundered in his chest, a sensation he hadn't felt in years. The mysterious woman in gold stood near a marble column, her presence drawing attention even as she seemed to want to fade into the background. "Good evening," he said softly, approaching her with careful steps. "I don't believe we've met." Behind her mask, her eyes widened slightly. "No, I don't believe we have." Her voice was gentle, measured, with a musical quality that made him lean in closer. "I'm Damon Graves," he offered, though surely she knew that already. "And you are—" She hesitated for a moment, then replied, "Belle, just Belle for tonight." Isla's heart raced as she spoke the name she'd chosen, her mother's favorite character from the fairy tales she used to read her. She kept her voice soft, trying not to let any of her usual speech patterns show through. "Belle," Damon repeated, tasting the name. "It suits you. Would you care to dance?" The orchestra had just begun a new waltz, its melody floating through the air like gossamer threads. Isla nodded, not trusting herself to speak as he led her onto the dance floor. His hand settled at her waist, warm and steady. As they began to move, Isla was grateful for the dancing lessons her mother had insisted on years ago, even when they could barely afford them. "Everyone should know how to dance," she'd said. "It feeds the soul. You dance beautifully." Damon murmured, genuine surprise in his voice. "Thank you," Isla replied. "My mother taught me that dancing isn't just about steps. It's about letting the music move through you." Something in her words made Damon's brow furrow slightly. "That's a lovely way to think about it. There's something familiar about you, Belle. Have we met before?" Isla's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her voice steady. "In a city this size? I'm sure we've crossed paths somewhere." They moved together as if they'd danced 1,000 times before. Camera flashes sparked around them occasionally, society photographers capturing the host with his mysterious partner, but neither seemed to notice. "Tell me about yourself," Damon said, guiding her through a turn. Isla chose her words carefully. "What would you like to know?" "Everything," he answered immediately, then looked surprised at his own eagerness. "I mean, what brings you here tonight?" "Perhaps the same thing that brings anyone to a masquerade," she said softly. "The chance to be someone else for a few hours, to step outside the boxes others put us in." Damon's steps faltered slightly. "You sound like you understand that well. Don't we all wear masks of some kind?" Isla asked, the words coming from somewhere deep inside her. "Even when we're not at a ball?" Their eyes met through their masks, and for a moment the rest of the room seemed to fade away. Damon felt something shift inside him, like a key turning in a long, rusted lock. "Most people don't see that," he said quietly. "They see the success, the money, the power. They don't understand the weight of expectations. The heaviest masks are often invisible." Isla replied, then bit her lip, worried she'd said too much. They continued dancing, conversation flowing naturally between them. Damon found himself sharing thoughts he'd never voiced aloud, about the loneliness of leadership, the pressure to maintain an image, the exhaustion of always being watched. Isla listened with genuine understanding, offering insights that made him feel truly heard for the first time in years. Yet she carefully steered away from revealing anything too personal about herself, even as she longed to speak freely. As they moved across the floor, Damon couldn't shake the feeling that he knew her from somewhere. Something in the way she tilted her head when she listened, or the gentle wisdom in her words. But every time he thought he was close to placing it, the recognition slipped away like smoke. The grand clock in the corner began to chime, marking the approach of midnight. Isla's heart leapt into her throat. She couldn't risk staying any longer. "I'm sorry," she said, pulling away gently. "I have to go." "What, now?" Damon reached for her hand. "Please, stay. We could talk more, perhaps somewhere quieter." "Thank you for the lovely evening," Isla said, already backing away. "It's been like a dream." Before he could respond, she turned and hurried towards the hallway, her gold dress shimmering as she moved through the crowd. Damon tried to follow, but guests kept stopping him, demanding his attention. By the time he reached the hallway, she was gone. Isla's hands trembled as she pressed the button for the service elevator, her heart still pounding from the evening's events. In the staff suite, she changed quickly back into her uniform, carefully hanging up the borrowed dress. The walk home that night was surreal. The city streets were quiet, but Isla's mind was filled with music, with the memory of dancing, with conversations that had felt so real, so genuine. Her feet barely seemed to touch the ground as she moved through the darkness, equal parts exhilarated and terrified by what had transpired. Back in the ballroom, Damon stood at the edge of the crowd, his eyes scanning faces he no longer cared to recognize. The champagne in his glass had gone flat, but he barely noticed. All he could think about was Belle, the way she moved, the depth of understanding in her eyes, the connection he'd felt that made him feel truly alive for the first time, in longer than he could remember. He turned to look out over the glittering crowd, but the magic of the evening had faded with her departure. The masks now seemed garish rather than mysterious, the laughter hollow rather than joyous. Somewhere in the city, a woman who had touched his soul had vanished like a dream, leaving him with nothing but questions and a yearning he didn't know how to satisfy. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Damon Graves's penthouse bedroom as his phone buzzed relentlessly on the nightstand. He groaned, reaching for it with eyes still heavy from sleep. The screen lit up with what seemed like hundreds of notifications, messages, emails, social media alerts, and news updates, all demanding his immediate attention. "What in the world?" he mumbled, sitting up and scrolling through the flood of information. His eyes widened as he saw the headlines. "Mystery woman captures billionaire's heart at masquerade." "Who is Black Belle? Social media explodes over Graves's dancing partner." "Cinderella story in the making. Unknown beauty steals the show." The photos were everywhere. Him and Belle dancing beneath the crystal chandeliers, her gold dress catching the light, both of them lost in conversation. The photographers had captured moments he hadn't even realized were being documented, the way he leaned in to hear her better, how their hands fitted together perfectly as they danced, the genuine smile on his face that he hardly recognized as his own. His phone rang, Mark Tillman's name flashing on the screen. "Have you seen the news?" Mark asked without preamble. "I'm looking at it right now." Damon replied, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "How did this blow up so fast?" "Are you kidding? You, the notorious workaholic who never dates, spending an entire evening dancing with a mysterious woman in gold. It's like catnip for the media." Downstairs, Isla arrived for her morning shift, her hands trembling slightly as she gathered her cleaning supplies. She'd barely slept, replaying the magical evening over and over in her mind. Now, in the harsh light of day, it felt like a dream. Until she saw the newspaper someone had left in the staff room, her own masked face staring back at her from the front page. She took a deep breath, straightened her uniform, and headed upstairs to begin her usual routine. The penthouse seemed different somehow, though nothing had physically changed. Or maybe she was the one who was different. As she approached Damon's office with her dusting supplies, she heard voices inside. The door was partially open, and she slipped in quietly, as she always did, hoping to complete her tasks without drawing attention. "I have to find her, Mark," Damon was saying, pacing near the window. "I can't explain it, but talking to her last night, it was different. She saw me. Really saw me." Mark lounged in one of the leather chairs, scrolling through his phone. "Well, the internet is certainly trying to help you out. Find Black Belle is trending worldwide." Isla's hand trembled as she dusted a bookshelf, forcing herself to maintain her usual steady pace. "It's crazy," Damon continued, running his fingers through his hair in frustration. "I invited my maid as a joke, and a goddess showed up instead." He laughed humorlessly. The universe has a strange sense of humor. The feather duster nearly slipped from Isla's grasp, but she caught it just in time. Her heart thundered in her chest as she moved to the next shelf, praying neither man would notice how still she'd gone at those words. "Speaking of which," Mark said, "maybe we should apologize to her. That wasn't our finest moment." Damon waved his hand dismissively. "Later. Right now, I need you to set up a PR campaign. We'll offer a reward for information leading to Belle's identity. Use whatever resources necessary." "Are you sure that's wise?" Mark asked. "It might come across as a bit intense." "I don't care," Damon insisted. "I need to find her. There was something real there, Mark. Something I haven't felt in years." Throughout the day, Isla moved through her tasks like a ghost, hyper-aware of every conversation around her. The staff couldn't stop talking about the mysterious Belle and the search for her identity. In the laundry room, two maids debated whether she was a foreign princess or a celebrity in disguise. In the kitchen, the chef theorized she must be from old money, given her poise and grace. "Did you see the way Mr. Graves looked at her?" One of the younger maids sighed dreamily. Like she was the only person in the room. Isla kept her head down, focusing on folding linens, while inside her mind raced with panic. How long could she keep this secret? What would happen when the truth came out? By late afternoon, the PR campaign was in full swing. Posters appeared on digital billboards throughout the city, and social media was flooded with the story. News anchors debated the romance of it all, comparing it to fairy tales and classic love stories. When her shift ended, Isla walked home under the city lights, her steps quick and nervous. The evening air was cool, but she barely noticed, lost in her thoughts. She passed a group of teenage girls clustered around a phone, giggling and chatting excitedly. "Oh my gosh, can you imagine?" One of them squealed. "Being Black Belle? Dancing with Damon Graves? She's like totally living every girl's dream." Another agreed. Isla hurried past them, pulling her coat tighter around herself. If they only knew that the woman they were talking about was walking right past them. A simple maid in sensible shoes and a worn jacket. But they didn't see her. Nobody ever did. She passed a digital billboard displaying one of the photos from the masquerade. The masked woman in the golden dress looked like someone else entirely. Confident, mysterious, worthy of a billionaire's attention. Isla quickened her pace, desperate to reach the safety of her small apartment where she could hide from the growing storm she'd inadvertently created. The city buzzed with excitement around her, alive with speculation about Black Belle's identity, while Isla Bennett, the woman behind the mask, walked home unnoticed in the gathering darkness. Her mother's earrings felt heavy in her coat pocket, the only tangible reminder that last night hadn't been just a dream. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse as Damon adjusted his tie for the 5th time that morning. His reflection stared back at him from the polished marble walls, looking as restless as he felt. In less than an hour, reporters would arrive to interview him about the mysterious Belle, and his stomach churned with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Down the hall in the dining room, Isla methodically wiped down the mahogany table, her movements careful and practiced. The gentle swish of her cleaning cloth provided a steady rhythm that somehow caught Damon's attention as he paced past the doorway. He paused, watching her work. There was something calming about her presence, the way she moved with such purpose, her face serene and focused. Had she always been this way? He realized with a start that he'd never really noticed before. "Good morning," he said, surprising himself as much as her. Isla's hand stilled for just a moment before continuing its circular motion on the table's surface. "Good morning, Mr. Graves," she replied softly, her eyes remaining fixed on her task. "You're very thorough," he observed, stepping into the room. "I've never seen this table shine quite like this." A slight flush colored her cheeks, but her movements remained steady. "Thank you, sir. My mother always said, anything worth doing is worth doing well." "Your mother sounds wise," Damon said, finding himself genuinely interested. It was the first real conversation they'd had since ever. "She was," Isla answered quietly, and something in her tone made Damon realize his mistake, the past tense in her words carrying a weight he recognized all too well. Before he could respond, Mark appeared in the doorway. "They're ready for you downstairs, Damon. Entertainment tonight is setting up in the main lobby." The morning passed in a blur of cameras and questions. "Mr. Graves, can you tell us about the mysterious Belle? Is it true you're offering a reward for information about her identity? Do you believe in love at first sight, Mr. Graves?" By early afternoon, Damon retreated to the penthouse for a scheduled charity planning meeting. the boardroom filled with executives and community leaders, all discussing the upcoming Children's Hospital Wing dedication. But as the conversation turned to naming rights, someone mentioned his father's philanthropic legacy. And suddenly the room felt too small. Damon's chest tightened. The familiar pressure built behind his eyes as memories of his father's disappointment, his constant criticism, flooded back. His hands gripped the edge of the conference table, knuckles white. Isla was refreshing water glasses when she noticed his distress. Without drawing attention to his state, she quietly approached his chair, setting a fresh glass of water before him. Then, standing slightly behind him, she began taking slow, deliberate breaths, loud enough for only him to hear. Almost unconsciously, Damon found himself matching her rhythm. In, out, in, out. The panic began to recede, his grip on the table loosening. She remained there, this steady presence at his back, until his breathing normalized and color returned to his face. The meeting continued, none of the other attendees aware of what had transpired. But Damon felt changed by the experience, touched by this simple act of compassion from someone he'd barely acknowledged before. As evening settled over the city, most of the staff had gone home. Isla was finishing up in the conference room, wiping down the table one final time, when Damon appeared in the doorway. "Thank you," he said softly. "For earlier." Isla nodded, continuing her work. "Sometimes we all need someone to breathe with us." Damon moved to the windows, staring out at the city lights. "You know, at the masquerade, there was this woman, Belle." He gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. "For the first time in years, I felt hope. The kind of hope I don't think I deserve." Isla's hand trembled slightly as she wiped the table, but her voice remained steady. "Everyone deserves hope, Mr. Graves." "Do they?" he asked quietly, more to himself than to her. "Even people who've wasted years behind walls of their own making? Especially them." Isla answered, her voice barely above a whisper. When she finished her task and gathered her supplies, Damon was still standing at the window, lost in thought. She slipped out quietly, her heart both soaring and breaking. Soaring because she had touched his soul, breaking because he didn't know it was her. Later that night, in his dimly lit study, Damon sat alone with a glass of water. No scotch tonight. Spread across his desk were dozens of tabloid photos from the masquerade. His fingers traced the outline of Belle's masked face, the elegant curve of her neck, the gentle smile that had somehow reached past all his defenses. "Where are you?" he whispered to the empty room, his words carrying all the longing of a man who had glimpsed something precious and lost it in the same moment. In her small apartment across town, Isla lay awake, her mother's earrings on the nightstand catching the moonlight. The weight of her secret pressed against her chest, along with the bittersweet knowledge that the man she was growing to care for was searching for someone he couldn't see was right in front of him. The break-room television cast a blue glow across Isla's worried face as she watched Damon step up to the podium. Camera flashes burst like lightning around him, while reporters jostled for position. Her hands trembled as she folded fresh towels, trying to appear busy while keeping her eyes fixed on the screen. "Good morning," Damon began, his voice carrying that practiced smoothness she knew so well. "As many of you are aware, at last week's annual masquerade ball, I had the privilege of meeting an extraordinary woman who has captured not only my attention, but apparently the imagination of the public as well." Mark stood just behind his right shoulder, watching the crowd with sharp eyes. Damon adjusted his tie, a nervous tell Isla had noticed over her years of service, before continuing. "Today, I'm announcing a $50,000 reward for credible information leading to the identification of the woman known to the media as Black Belle. I want to be clear, This is not a publicity stunt. I simply wish to thank her for a memorable evening and perhaps—" He paused, and for a moment his polished facade cracked, revealing something raw underneath. "Perhaps have the chance to know her better." Eileen entered the break room just as Isla's stack of folded towels toppled over. "Steady now, child," she murmured, helping gather the scattered linens. "This too shall pass." But it didn't pass. It exploded. Within hours, the phone lines at Graves Enterprises were overwhelmed. Young women claiming to be Belle called by the hundreds, each with a carefully crafted story about why they had disappeared at midnight. The social media team was drowning in direct messages and emails. Isla's usual cleaning routine doubled as she was assigned to help tidy the public relations department, where dozens of temporary workers had been brought in to handle the volume of inquiries. Empty coffee cups and takeout, containers littered every surface. She kept her head down, methodically cleaning while conversations about Belle swirled around her. "This one says she left because her grandmother was in the hospital," a tired-looking intern announced, reading from her screen. "Add it to the medical emergency pile." Her supervisor sighed. "That's the third grandmother today. I have one claiming she's a secret princess who had to return to her small European country." Another called out, drawing exhausted laughter. Damon strode through the department, his jaw tight with frustration. He barely glanced at Itzler as she quickly stepped aside, pressing herself against the wall to let him pass. The sight of him, so close yet so far, made her heart ache. Later that afternoon, she overheard him talking to Mark in the executive kitchen while she restocked paper supplies in the adjacent supply closet. "I haven't slept more than 4 hours a night since the ball," Damon admitted, his voice heavy with fatigue. "I keep replaying every moment, every word we exchanged. It's maddening, Mark. I can't shake this feeling that I'm missing something obvious, like she's already in my life somehow, just out of sight." "Maybe she is," Mark replied thoughtfully. "Have you considered—" "I've considered everything," Damon cut him off. "I've had the security team review every employee file, every contractor, every guest list from the past 5 years. Nothing fits." Isla's hands shook so badly she dropped a package of napkins. Both men paused at the sound, but she remained silent and still until their conversation moved away down the hall. That evening, she sought refuge in the church community center's kitchen, where Eileen was orchestrating the annual bake sale fundraiser. The familiar scents of vanilla and cinnamon wrapped around her, like a warm embrace as she tied on an apron. "You're just in time," Eileen said, pushing a bowl of cookie dough toward her. "These snickerdoodles won't roll themselves." For the next 2 hours, Isla lost herself in the rhythm of baking. She rolled dough into perfect spheres, dipped them in cinnamon sugar, and lined them up on baking sheets while elderly church members shared gossip and prayer requests around her. Their chatter washed over her like gentle waves, slowly eroding the day's tension. "Child, you're 1,000,000 miles away," Mrs. Johnson, one of the church elders, observed as she helped Isla package cooled cookies. "Want to share what's troubling that heart of yours?" Isla carefully tied a ribbon around a box before answering. "Have you ever wanted something so badly it scared you? Something that seemed impossible?" The older woman's eyes softened with understanding. "That's usually when I take it to the Lord in prayer. He has a way of making the impossible possible, in his own time." Isla nodded, blinking back tears as she reached for another box. She had been praying, but her prayers were complicated tangles of guilt and longing. How could she ask for Damon's love while deceiving him? Yet how could she reveal herself now, after letting him search for so long? "I'm not worthy of what I want," she whispered, more to herself than to Mrs. Johnson. "Now that's just the devil talking," Eileen cut in firmly, having overheard as she passed by with a tray of fresh scones. "You're worthy of every blessing God has in store for you. Don't you let anyone, including yourself, tell you different." By the time Isla left the church that night, her heart felt lighter, buoyed by the love and prayers of her community. But as she walked home, passing newsstands with headlines about the search for Belle, doubt crept back in like a cold wind. Meanwhile, in his penthouse high above the city, Damon stood on his private balcony. The night air carried a hint of autumn crispness, and the city sprawled before him like a sea of stars. Somewhere out there was the woman who had made him feel truly seen for the first time in years. He pressed his palms against the cool glass railing, leaning forward to stare into the darkness. The reward announcement had brought nothing but chaos and false leads. Every hour that passed made the magical evening feel more like a dream, beautiful, but ultimately untouchable. "Where are you?" he whispered to the glittering cityscape. "Why can't I find you?" The wind carried his words away, leaving him alone with his thoughts and the growing fear that he was chasing a phantom, a perfect moment that could never be recaptured. He remained there long into the night, searching the horizon for answers that refused to come. Dark clouds rolled across the evening sky, turning day to premature night as the cleaning staff finished their final tasks in Damon Graves's penthouse. Thunder cracked overhead, making the windows rattle in their frames. Isla Bennett was wiping down the last counter in the kitchen when the first heavy drops began pelting against the glass. Within minutes, the storm intensified into a full deluge. Lightning split the sky in brilliant forks, followed by booming thunder that seemed to shake the entire building. The staff gathered nervously by the service entrance, peering out at sheets of rain so thick they could barely see the street below. "No one is leaving in this," came Damon's firm voice from behind them. The staff turned, surprised to find him there. He rarely ventured into their areas. "It's not safe. Please, everyone stay until it passes." His eyes met Isla's briefly before scanning the rest of the group. "I'm ordering dinner for everyone. Make yourselves comfortable in the staff lounge." The kitchen staff quickly transformed the simple break room into a makeshift dining area, while others called home to explain their delay. Isla helped arrange chairs, stealing glances at Damon as he coordinated with his regular delivery service, who braved the storm to bring hot food for 20 people. "Mr. Graves didn't have to do this," whispered Maria, one of the newer maids. "He's not always what he seems." Isla replied softly, remembering his gentleness during his anxiety attack days before. The food arrived, containers of fragrant pasta, salads, and warm bread, and the staff settled in to eat. Damon insisted on joining them, pulling up a chair at the corner of the table. His presence initially created tension, but as the storm raged outside, the atmosphere gradually relaxed. Isla sat quietly, watching him interact with her colleagues. He remembered names, asked about families, and seemed genuinely interested in their responses. This was a different Damon than the one who had carelessly invited her to the masquerade as a joke. Different even from the man who had danced with Belle. A particularly violent thunderclap made the lights flicker ominously. Moments later, darkness engulfed the penthouse. Emergency lights clicked on, casting everything in a dim glow. "Everyone stay calm," Damon called out. "The generator will kick in shortly. There are emergency lanterns in storage. Isla, could you help me locate them?" Isla's heart jumped at being singled out, but she nodded and followed him through the shadowy hallways. They made their way to his private library, where emergency supplies were kept in a cabinet. "I think they're on the top shelf," Damon said, clicking on his phone's flashlight. The beam caught dust motes dancing in the air, creating an almost magical atmosphere in the book-lined room. As Isla reached for the lanterns, another thunderclap startled her. She stumbled slightly, and Damon steadied her with a gentle hand on her elbow. The touch sent electricity through her that had nothing to do with the storm. Thank you, she murmured, voice barely audible above the rain drumming against the windows. Damon didn't immediately let go. In the dim light, his face looked vulnerable, almost lost. Would you mind sitting with me for a moment? He asked hesitantly. Something about storms like this makes the world feel different. More honest, maybe. They settled into 2 leather armchairs near the window, a battery-powered lantern between them casting a warm glow. Lightning illuminated the room in brief, brilliant flashes. I haven't told many people this, Damon began slowly. But 3 years ago, I was engaged. He paused, collecting his thoughts. She was the daughter of one of our major investors. Everyone said we were perfect together. But 2 weeks before the wedding, I discovered she had been feeding confidential information to a rival company the entire time we were together. The relationship was just a cover for corporate espionage. Isla's heart ached at the pain in his voice. That must have been devastating. It was. His laugh was hollow. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal. It was realizing that I hadn't really loved her. I'd chosen her because she made sense on paper, because she was what everyone expected. He looked out at the storm. Sometimes I wonder if I'm even capable of real love, if there's anything lovable beneath all this performance. There is, Isla said without thinking. When he turned to her in surprise, she added quickly, I've seen how you care about people, like tonight, making sure everyone was safe. Damon smiled sadly. You're kind to say that, but what about you? You're always so quiet, so contained. Are you hiding too? The question hit too close to home, and Isla felt tears welling up. I lost my mother last year, she admitted. She was everything to me. My best friend, my role model. Sometimes I feel like I disappeared when she did. Like I'm just going through the motions, invisible to everyone. I see you, Damon said softly. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Thunder rolled again, but it seemed more distant now. Isla could hear her heart pounding in the quiet that followed. Can I tell you something strange? Damon leaned forward, his face earnest in the lantern light. Sometimes I get this feeling, like the right person is standing right in front of me, hidden somehow, like I'm missing something obvious. Isla's breath caught. The truth pressed against her lips, desperate to escape. She was Belle. She was the woman he'd been searching for. She was right here, but fear froze the words in her throat. What if he was angry about her deception? What if he fired her? What if knowing she was just a maid destroyed the magic of that night? The moment stretched between them like a soap bubble, beautiful and fragile. Then the overhead lights hummed back to life, shattering the spell. We should get these lanterns to the others, Isla said quickly, standing up. Her hands trembled as she gathered the emergency supplies. The storm was finally easing when the staff prepared to leave around midnight. To everyone's surprise, Damon insisted on personally walking each person to the service exit to ensure they got to their cars safely. When it was Isla's turn, she could barely meet his eyes. Thank you for tonight, she said softly. For everything. Thank you for listening, he replied. Drive safely. Later, in her own bed, Isla lay awake, replaying his words. Like the right person is standing right in front of me, hidden. Hot tears slid down her temples into her hair as she stared at the ceiling, the weight of her secret pressing down on her chest like a stone. The autumn sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of the Grand Plaza Hotel as Damon Graves adjusted his tie, preparing to address the annual Children's Hospital Foundation luncheon. He noticed Vanessa Beaumont watching him from across the room, her perfectly manicured fingers wrapped around a champagne flute. She'd been hovering closer than usual lately, ever since the masquerade ball made headlines. "Damon, darling." Vanessa's voice carried across the room as she sashayed toward him. "You look positively exhausted. Still pining after your mysterious belle?" He forced a polite smile. "Good morning, Vanessa. I didn't expect to see you here." "Oh, I never miss an opportunity to support the children," she said, though her eyes held no warmth. "And to catch up with old friends, of course. Speaking of friends—" She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "I've heard some rather concerning things about your masked lady." Damon's jaw tightened. "I'm not interested in gossip." "This isn't gossip, darling. This is protecting you." Vanessa's perfectly painted lips curved into a sympathetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. "My sources tell me she's quite the accomplished con artist. Apparently, she's pulled this masked beauty routine at other high-profile events, always targeting wealthy men, always disappearing before midnight, like a deranged Cinderella." "Your sources?" Damon's voice was sharp. "I have friends at several newspapers." Vanessa shrugged delicately. "They're running the story this afternoon. I thought you should hear it from a friend first." Before Damon could respond, his phone buzzed, then buzzed again. And again. His stomach dropped as he saw the notifications flooding in. Mystery Belle exposed. Serial scammer targets billionaire CEO masked beauty's web of lies, revealed Graves Enterprises. Stock drops amid dating scandal. The words blurred before his eyes as his chest tightened. He'd been so sure about Belle, about that connection they'd shared. Had it all been an act? Back at the penthouse, Isla was dusting the staff break room television when the news broke. She froze, feather duster suspended in midair as she watched the headlines scroll across the screen. "Can you believe it?" Sarah from accounting whispered to another staff member. "Poor Mr. Graves. They're saying she's done this before. Shows up at fancy parties in disguise, gets close to rich men, then vanishes. Probably trying to get her 15 minutes of fame. Or a big payout." Someone else added, "Remember how the papers said he was offering a reward to find her?" Isla's hands trembled as she gripped the duster. She felt sick. This wasn't supposed to happen. She'd never meant to cause such chaos. The afternoon brought more turmoil as the board of directors called an emergency meeting. Isla could hear the raised voices from where she cleaned in the hallway. "This is a PR nightmare, Graves!" someone shouted. "First you're mooning around like a lovesick teenager, and now we find out you were played by a con artist? The stock is down 3 points already." "We have no proof these allegations are true." Damon's voice was tight with tension. "The damage is done. You've lost control. This company needs steady leadership, not romantic drama splashed across every tabloid in the country." Isla moved further down the hall, trying to block out the angry voices, when she heard crying from the break room. She found Jenny, one of the newer cleaning staff, sobbing as she packed up her locker. "What happened?" Isla asked softly. "They're firing me," Jenny choked out. "Someone reported that I was taking pictures in Mr. Graves's office with my phone, but I wasn't. I was just checking the time because my watch stopped working. I need this job. I have 2 kids." Something fierce and protective rose in Isla's chest. Without hesitation, she marched to the Human Resources office, Jenny's phone in hand. "Excuse me," she said firmly, stepping into the office where Mr. Peterson, the HR director, sat with Jenny's supervisor. "I need to show you something." Both men looked startled at her interruption, but Isla pressed on. "Jenny's phone. Look at the timestamps on her photos. There are none from today. The last picture was taken 3 days ago at her daughter's school play. She's telling the truth about checking the time." "Miss Bennett, this isn't your concern," Mr. Peterson began. "It is my concern." Isla's voice rang with conviction. Jenny is a good worker who's being punished unfairly. We're supposed to be better than that here." The men exchanged glances, surprised by this unexpected show of backbone from the usually quiet Maid. Through the glass walls, Isla could see Damon had emerged from his meeting and was watching the scene with interest. "I'll review the situation," Mr. Peterson said finally. "Jenny, you can return to work pending investigation." Jenny hugged Isla tearfully as they left the office. As they passed Damon, Isla caught his expression, a mixture of surprise and something else she couldn't quite read. But instead of the usual warmth in his eyes, there was a guardedness that made her heart ache. That evening, the penthouse felt eerily quiet. Most of the staff had gone home, but Isla stayed late to finish some extra tasks, trying to keep her mind occupied. As she passed Damon's office, she saw him sitting alone in the dark, illuminated only by the city lights through the window. His shoulders were slumped, his usual confident posture replaced by defeat. She wanted desperately to go to him, to tell him the truth, to explain that Belle wasn't a con artist, she was just a woman who'd been afraid to show her true self. But the words stuck in her throat. After today's chaos, after seeing how the board had reacted, how could she possibly reveal herself? It would only make things worse. Walking home that night, Isla made her decision. She would pull back, keep her head down, be nothing more than the quiet maid she'd always been. It was the only way to protect both of them from the mess she'd created. But each step felt heavy with regret, weighted down by the truth she couldn't speak and the connection she'd have to let fade away. In his darkened office, Damon sat motionless, staring out at the glittering city below. The woman he'd danced with, the one who'd made him feel truly seen for the first time in years. Had it all been a lie? The board was right. He'd lost control, let himself be vulnerable, and now he was paying the price. He reached for his phone, hovering over the cancel, reward, press release draft, but couldn't quite bring himself to send it. Not yet. The morning sun hadn't yet risen when Isla arrived at the penthouse, clutching a white envelope in her trembling hands. The halls were silent. Most of the staff wouldn't arrive for another hour. She'd spent all night writing and rewriting her resignation letter, trying to find the right words to say goodbye without revealing too much of her heart. Her footsteps echoed in the empty marble foyer as she made her way to the staff locker room. The familiar space where she'd changed into her uniform countless times now felt foreign, as if she were already becoming a stranger here. She changed slowly, smoothing her hands over the crisp fabric one last time. The kitchen was dark when she entered to start the morning coffee service, a routine she'd perfected over years. Her fingers moved automatically, measuring the specialty beans Damon preferred, while her mind wandered to the dance they'd shared, to conversations in the storm-lit library, to quiet moments that had meant everything and nothing. She heard his arrival before she saw him, heavy footsteps that spoke of exhaustion. When Damon appeared in the kitchen doorway, he looked like he hadn't slept at all. His usual impeccable appearance was slightly rumpled, dark circles prominent under his eyes. "Good morning, Mr. Graves," Isla said softly, reaching for a coffee cup. "Would you like—" "Just leave it," he snapped, his voice sharp with fatigue and stress. "I don't need you hovering over me like I'm incapable of pouring my own coffee." Isla's hand froze mid-reach, her chest tightening at his harsh tone. She'd seen him stressed before, but he'd never directed that anger at her. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to. Everyone's watching me lately, waiting for me to break down or make another mistake," he continued, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "I don't need my staff scrutinizing me, too." The words "my staff" hit like a physical blow, reminding Isla exactly where she stood in his world. She placed the cup down with trembling fingers and stepped back, keeping her eyes lowered to hide the tears threatening to spill. "Of course, sir. I apologize for overstepping." Her voice was barely above a whisper. Without looking at him again, she slipped past him into the hallway, the white envelope burning in her pocket. She waited until Damon had gone to his office before approaching his desk. The morning light was streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, making the city below sparkle. How many mornings had she dusted this office, stealing glances at him while he worked? How many times had she imagined a different life, a different version of herself who could belong in his world? Isla placed the envelope in the center of his desk, her fingers lingering for just a moment on the heavy paper. Then she turned away and began her final shift, throwing herself into the familiar routine of cleaning and organizing, trying to lose herself in the work rather than think about what came next. The morning passed in a blur of polishing and dusting, each task tinged with the bittersweetness of last time. Last time arranging fresh flowers in the foyer, last time wiping down the conference room windows, last time straightening the throw pillows in the library where they'd shared their deepest secrets during the storm. It wasn't until mid-afternoon that she heard the commotion from Damon's office. His voice carried down the hall, a mix of confusion and something that sounded almost like panic. "What do you mean she resigned? Where is she?" Isla quickened her pace, grabbing her few belongings from her locker. She couldn't face him, couldn't bear to see the moment he might connect the dots between the quiet maid and the mysterious belle who'd captured his attention at the masquerade. She was closing her locker when she heard the elevator doors open and Damon's urgent footsteps in the hall. Without looking back, she slipped out the service entrance and took the back stairs down to the street. The rain started as she waited at the bus stop, fat drops that quickly soaked through her thin jacket. When the bus finally arrived, she climbed aboard and sank into a seat near the back, pressing her forehead against the cool window. Her tears mingled with the raindrops streaming down the glass, blurring the city into a kaleidoscope of grey and gold. Back in the penthouse, Damon stood in the empty hallway outside the staff lockers, her resignation letter crumpled in his fist. The space felt enormous suddenly, echoing with absence. He'd driven away the one person who'd seen past his walls, who'd brought him water during panic attacks and breathed with him until the anxiety passed, who'd defended others without fear and moved through his life with quiet grace. He leaned against the wall, closing his eyes against the weight of loss. In the span of a week, he'd lost both the mysterious woman who'd made him believe in connection again, and the steady presence who'd grounded him through each day. The hallway stretched empty before him, filled with nothing but regret, and the ghost of chances he'd failed to take. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing away footprints and blurring the lines between what was and what might have been. The morning sun cast long shadows across Damon's penthouse, but he barely noticed its warmth. He hadn't slept well, his mind racing with thoughts of Isla's sudden departure and the mysterious belle who still haunted his dreams. His coffee sat untouched on the kitchen counter as he paced from room to room, unable to settle. Every space felt different without Isla's quiet presence. The fresh flowers she arranged daily were starting to wilt. The normally spotless surfaces had begun collecting dust. But it was more than that. The penthouse felt hollow, as if its heart had been removed. Damon wandered into his study, hoping work might distract him. As he approached his desk, something caught his eye, a faint sparkle on the dark, hardwood floor. He knelt down, running his finger through what appeared to be fine gold glitter, the same shimmer that had covered Belle's gown at the masquerade, catching the light as they danced. His heart began to beat faster. Why would there be masquerade glitter in his study, weeks after the event? The cleaning staff had thoroughly vacuumed every room. Unless... He stood up quickly, moving to his desk. Papers had piled up since Isla left, and he began sorting through them mechanically, his mind whirling with possibilities. As he shifted a stack of contracts, something clattered to the floor. Bending down, he found a delicate gold bracelet, broken at the clasp. Damon's hands trembled as he picked it up. He remembered this bracelet vividly. He had fastened it around Belle's wrist during their dance, commenting on how perfectly it suited her. When she'd disappeared at midnight, he'd assumed she'd taken it with her. But here it was, hidden beneath cleaning supplies on his desk. "It can't be," he whispered, but his mind was already racing backward, connecting dots he should have seen weeks ago. The way Belle had navigated the penthouse so confidently, knowing exactly which hallway to take when she fled. How she'd known personal details about his life that he'd never shared publicly. The familiar grace in her movements that had struck him even through his champagne haze. With shaking hands, he began pulling open desk drawers, searching for... he wasn't sure what. In the bottom drawer, beneath a stack of old reports, he found a folded piece of paper. The handwriting was neat and careful. He recognized it from the notes Isla left about household supplies. "Dear Mr. Graves," the letter began. "I know I should tell you in person, but I'm not as brave as you think I am. Thank you for the dance at the masquerade. For one night, you made me feel seen for the first time. I've spent so long trying to be invisible, I forgot what it felt like to shine. But we live in different worlds, and some dreams are better left as beautiful memories. Please forgive me for not being honest sooner. Isla." The paper crumpled in his grip, as understanding crashed over him like a wave. Isla's quiet dignity, her perceptive nature, the way she always seemed to know exactly what he needed before he asked. The gentle strength that had drawn him to Belle, it had been there all along, right in front of him. "How could I have been so blind?" he whispered into the empty study. Memories flooded back. Her hurt expression when he'd made that thoughtless joke about taking her to the masquerade. The way she'd flinched this morning when he'd snapped at her about the coffee. All this time, she'd been carrying this secret, watching him search for a woman who had been beside him every day. The weight of his own arrogance nearly brought him to his knees. He'd been so caught up in his image of the mysterious Belle, he'd completely overlooked the remarkable woman who'd been caring for him, supporting him, seeing him at his worst and best moments. Without conscious thought, he was moving. He grabbed his coat from the back of his chair, the broken bracelet still clutched in his hand. The elevator seemed to take forever, each second stretching as his mind raced with all the things he needed to say, to explain, to apologize for. The morning traffic blurred past his windows as his driver navigated the city streets. Damon sat forward in his seat, tension radiating through his body. He had to find her, had to make this right, had to tell her that she'd been wrong in her letter. They didn't live in different worlds. They lived in the same one, where a woman's true worth had nothing to do with her job title or social status, but everything to do with her heart. The broken bracelet pressed into his palm as he clutched it tighter, a physical reminder of how close he'd come to losing something precious without ever truly seeing it. The car moved through the rain-slicked streets as Damon's determination grew with each passing block. He would find Isla. He would make her understand that she had never been invisible to him. He had just been too blind to see what was right in front of him all along. The morning sun cast long shadows across unfamiliar streets as Damon's car rolled slowly through Isla's neighborhood. Unlike the sleek high-rises of his world, these blocks held weathered brick buildings and small family businesses, their hand-painted signs faded but proud. His driver pulled up to the curb, and Damon stepped out, adjusting his tie, a nervous habit he couldn't shake. The first stop was a corner grocery store, its bell chiming as he entered. An elderly man looked up from arranging produce, eyebrows raised at Damon's expensive suit. "Excuse me," Damon said, trying to soften his corporate tone. "I'm looking for Isla Bennett. Do you know her?" The man shook his head. but a woman stocking shelves turned around. "Isla? Sweet girl. Always helps Mrs. Rodriguez carry her groceries home. Haven't seen her today, though." Damon thanked them and continued down the street, stopping at a bakery, a pharmacy, and a small cafe. Each time he described Isla, her gentle manner, her glasses, her quiet grace. Some recognized her, others didn't, but no one knew where to find her. His breakthrough came at Hope Community Church, a brick building with worn steps and stained glass windows catching the morning light. Inside, he found a group of older women preparing for a food drive, their conversations echoing in the high-ceilinged space. "Isla Bennett," one woman repeated, her face brightening. "Oh, you must mean Sarah's girl." Another woman joined them, wiping her hands on her apron. "Sarah's daughter? Lord, that woman was a saint. Raised Isla all by herself, working 2 jobs but never missed a Sunday service. Always had something to give, even when times were hard," the first woman added. "Sarah taught at the Sunday school right up until she got sick. Isla's just like her mama, got that same giving heart." Damon leaned against a nearby pew, drinking in every detail. "Could you tell me more about them?" The women, who introduced themselves as Miss Martha and Miss Ruby, were happy to share. They told him how Sarah Bennett had organized food drives during the recession, making sure no family went hungry. How she'd kept a box of emergency supplies in her tiny apartment for neighbors in need. How she'd passed these values to Isla, teaching her that true wealth came from what you gave, not what you had. "That girl volunteers more than anyone half her age," Miss Ruby said proudly. "Helps us deliver groceries to folks who can't get out anymore. Reads to the foster children at the community center every Thursday." "Foster children?" Damon asked, his throat tight. Miss Martha nodded. "At the Hope Haven Community Center. Those kids light up when they see her coming. She does different voices for all the characters in their stories." Each revelation hit Damon like a physical blow. While he'd been focused on finding his mysterious belle, Isla had been quietly making her community better, one small act of kindness at a time. He spent the afternoon following leads across the neighborhood. At the food pantry, a volunteer remembered Isla helping sort donations the previous weekend. "Such a hard worker," the woman said. "Never takes a break, even when we tell her to rest." "Do you know when she'll be back?" Damon asked. "She mentioned helping at the community center tomorrow. They're having some kind of special reading program for the kids." As the sun began to set, Damon found himself sitting in his parked car on a quiet street, staring at the mix of small homes and apartment buildings around him. This was Isla's world. Not the glossy perfection of his penthouse, but something far more real and precious. He gripped the steering wheel, rehearsing possible words in his head. "I'm sorry," seemed pathetically inadequate. How could he apologize for treating her like she was invisible, for failing to see the remarkable woman who had been right in front of him? "I've been such a fool," he whispered to the empty car. The broken bracelet sat heavy in his pocket, a reminder of everything he stood to lose. Tomorrow, he would go to the community center. Tomorrow, he would try to make things right. But tonight, he sat in the growing darkness, humbled by the discovery that the woman he'd been searching for had been quietly changing lives while he'd been too blind to notice. Through his windshield, he watched residents returning home from work, greeting neighbors, carrying groceries. This was the community that had shaped Isla, that had taught her the values her mother held dear. He felt overwhelmed by regret for every moment he'd treated her as just another employee, and by a new sense of purpose that went beyond simply finding her. He needed to prove he could see her, truly see her, for exactly who she was. Not the mysterious belle from the masquerade, not the quiet maid from his penthouse, but Isla Bennett, daughter, volunteer, caregiver, storyteller. A woman whose real magic had nothing to do with masks or ball gowns, but everything to do with the way she moved through the world, making it better with each small act of kindness. The streetlights flickered on one by one as Damon sat there, surrounded by the gentle pulse of neighborhood life, rehearsing words he hoped would be enough to bridge the distance between their worlds. The Hope Haven Community Center buzzed with the cheerful energy of children as afternoon sunlight streamed through its large windows. Isla moved between the tables in the activity room, setting out paper plates filled with apple slices and graham crackers. Her heart felt lighter here, surrounded by the innocent chatter and laughter of the foster kids who had become such an important part of her life. "Miss Isla, can you read us the dragon story again?" 7-year-old Marcus asked, tugging at her sleeve with sticky fingers. She smiled down at him, grateful for the distraction from her thoughts of Damon and the life she'd left behind. "After snacks, sweetie. Everyone needs their energy for story time." The children gathered around the tables, some still working on art projects, while others eagerly reached for their treats. Isla made sure everyone had napkins and helped little Sophie open her juice box. This was where she belonged, not in some fairy tale fantasy of masked balls and crystal chandeliers. "Who wants to help me pick out our next book?" she asked, leading a small parade of excited kids towards the reading corner with its worn but comfortable beanbag chairs. She didn't notice the door opening quietly behind her. Didn't see Damon Graves step into the room, his usual confident stance replaced by nervous uncertainty. He hung back near the entrance, watching as Isla settled into the large reading chair with children sprawled around her feet. "Once upon a time," she began, her voice taking on the warm, engaging tone she used for storytelling, "there was a brave young dragon who was different from all the others." The children leaned in, completely captivated. Damon found himself moving closer, drawn by the natural grace with which she commanded their attention. This was a side of Isla he'd never seen, confident, animated, completely in her element. She was halfway through the story when she finally glanced up and saw him. The words died in her throat as their eyes met across the room. The children, noticing her sudden silence, turned to follow her gaze. "Just a moment, everyone," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. She carefully marked their place in the book with trembling hands. Damon took a step forward, his expression gentle. "Please, don't stop on my account. I can wait." Isla forced herself to finish the story, though her heart pounded so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. The children, sensing something important was happening, were unusually quiet when she closed the book. "Miss Jenny will help you with craft time," she told them softly, nodding to one of the center's regular volunteers. As the kids reluctantly moved away, she stood, smoothing her simple cotton dress with damp palms. "Mr. Graves," she said formally, expecting to see anger or accusation in his eyes. Instead, she found something that looked almost like tenderness. "I know it was you, Isla," he said quietly, taking another step closer. "You were Belle." She shook her head automatically, panic rising in her chest. "I don't know what you're talking about. I should get back to the gold glitter," he interrupted gently. "It was still on the floor near my desk, exactly like the shimmer from Belle's dress. And the bracelet I fastened around her wrist, your wrist, I found it hidden under the cleaning supplies." Isla's hands flew to her throat, where the phantom weight of that beautiful masked night still lingered. "I never meant to—" "And then there was the note," Damon continued, his voice thick with emotion. "The one you never sent, thanking me for the dance, for making you feel seen." Tears spilled down Isla's cheeks as the careful walls she'd built began to crumble. "I was so ashamed," she whispered. "It started as a joke to you, inviting the maid to your grand ball. I shouldn't have gone at all, but Eileen convinced me I deserved one night to just be someone else." "No," Damon said firmly, closing the distance between them. "You weren't being someone else. You were finally letting your true self shine through. I'm the one who should be ashamed. I've spent weeks searching for Belle, when the most remarkable woman I've ever met was right in front of me the whole time." He reached for her hand, but she pulled back, wrapping her arms around herself protectively. "You don't have to say these things. I know what I am. Just the help. Someone to clean your home and serve your coffee." "You're wrong," Damon said, his voice cracking. "God, Isla, you're so wrong. I've spent the last day learning about who you really are. The way you take care of this community just like your mother did. How you help deliver groceries to elderly neighbors, volunteer at the food bank, read to these children." Fresh tears fell as Isla thought of her mother. "How did you— I talked to Miss Martha and Miss Ruby at your church," he admitted. "They told me about Sarah, about how she raised you alone, working multiple jobs but never losing her generous spirit. They told me you're just like her." A small sob escaped Isla's throat. "You went to my church?" "I went everywhere I could think of to find you, to understand you, and what I discovered—" He paused, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I've been such a fool, Isla. I want to apologize, not just for that thoughtless invitation, but for every day I failed to see you. Every time I treated you like you were invisible, when you were actually the one holding my whole world together." The raw honesty in his voice made her breath catch. Around them, the sounds of children playing and craft supplies rustling created a gentle backdrop to this moment of truth. "I need some air," Isla whispered, turning towards the door that led to the center's small courtyard. Damon followed her outside, where the late afternoon sun painted everything in soft gold light. A few potted flowers brightened the concrete space, carefully tended by the center's staff and volunteers. "You don't understand," she said without turning around. "I'm not Belle. That was just a dream, a beautiful dream, but it wasn't real." "You're right," Damon said softly, "because I didn't fall in love with Belle." Now she did turn, her eyes wide with surprise. "I fell in love with the woman who noticed when I was having anxiety attacks and knew exactly how to help me breathe through them," he continued. "The one who remembered exactly how I take my coffee without ever being told. Who works tirelessly to make everyone's lives better without expecting any recognition. Who has more grace and strength in her little finger than I have in my whole body." He took a careful step toward her. "I fell in love with you, Isla Bennett. Not a mask, not a fancy dress, just you. And I'm hoping you'll give me the chance to prove it." The late afternoon sunlight cast long shadows across the community center's courtyard as Damon took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving Isla's face. "I want to start over," he said softly. "No masks, no pretenses, no power dynamics, just two people getting to know each other honestly and respectfully." Isla's fingers twisted nervously in the fabric of her simple cotton dress. "I don't know if I can trust this," she admitted. "Everything in my life has taught me to keep my expectations small, to protect my heart." "I understand that," Damon replied, gesturing to a wooden bench nestled between flowering potted plants. "May we sit?" She nodded, and they settled onto the bench, leaving a careful space between them. A gentle breeze carried the sweet scent of jasmine from the community garden nearby. "I've spent so much time hiding behind my own mask," Damon continued. "The successful CEO, the untouchable billionaire, it was easier than risking real connection. But you—" he turned to face her fully. "You've shown me what genuine grace looks like." I just try to live the way Mama taught me, Isla said quietly. She always said our circumstances don't determine our character. Your mother sounds like a wise woman. She was. Isla's voice softened with memory. Even when times were hardest, she never lost her joy or her faith. Damon watched a butterfly land on a nearby flower. Would you allow me to take you on a real date? No balls, no masks, just dinner, conversation, and the chance to begin again? Isla's heart fluttered like that butterfly's wings. I think I'd like that. As they sat together, the emotional wall between them began to crack and crumble. Damon spoke about losing his father, about the pressure to maintain a perfect image, about the fiancé who had only wanted his money and status. Isla shared stories of her mother's illness, of working multiple jobs to pay medical bills, of finding purpose in serving others even when her own heart was breaking. Sometimes I feel like I'm still that little girl, Isla admitted, watching Mama work herself to exhaustion but never complaining. She taught me that real strength isn't about power or money. It's about loving others well, even when it's hard. You've taught me the same lesson, Damon said. His hand rested on the bench between them, inches from hers. I promise you, Isla, I will never again let pride or position blind me to what matters most, to who matters most. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of pink and gold as they finally stood to leave. Damon insisted on walking Isla home, their footsteps matching pace along the familiar neighborhood sidewalks. Children played double dutch in front yards, while grandmothers watched from porches, nodding quiet greetings. When they reached the gate of Isla's apartment building, Damon paused. The streetlights were just beginning to flicker on, creating a soft glow around them. You were never invisible to God, Isla, he said softly, his voice full of reverence and regret. I'm the one who failed to see. The truth of his words hung in the evening air between them, a promise of something new beginning, something real, unmasked, and beautifully possible. The gentle October breeze rustled through the trees as Damon's car pulled up to a modest two-story house in Isla's old neighborhood. 3 weeks had passed since their honest conversation in the community center courtyard, and each day had brought them closer together. Why are we stopping here? Isla asked, her eyes widening as she recognized the familiar street where she grew up. Damon smiled softly. I have something to show you. They stepped out of the car, and Isla's hand flew to her mouth as she took in the sight before her. The once weathered house now stood proudly restored, its pale yellow paint fresh and welcoming. The garden beds her mother had lovingly tended were replanted with chrysanthemums and autumn flowers. But it was the porch that brought tears to her eyes. The creaking, uneven boards that her mother had always dreamed of fixing were replaced with smooth hardwood, gleaming in the morning sun. A porch swing, just like the one from her childhood memories, hung ready for peaceful evenings. Damon, she whispered, unable to find more words. This isn't a grand gesture, he said quietly, standing beside her. It's a tribute to your mother's legacy. The family living here now, they're good people who needed a helping hand, just like your mother always offered to others. Isla walked slowly up the new steps, her fingers trailing along the sturdy railing. Mama used to sit right here, she said, touching the porch swing. She'd read her Bible every morning, watching the sunrise. Over the past weeks, their relationship had grown naturally, rooted in mutual respect and understanding. They shared quiet dinners where conversations flowed easily, attended Sunday services together at Isla's church, and worked side by side at community events. Damon found himself drawn to her genuine spirit, while Isla discovered the tender heart beneath his polished exterior. I have something else to discuss with you, Damon said, as they sat on the porch swing. "I've been thinking about the Women's Empowerment Initiative we're launching at the company." Isla turned to him, curious. "I want you to lead it," he continued. "Your compassion, your strength, your ability to see the best in people. These aren't just personal qualities, Isla. They're leadership gifts." "But I don't have the corporate experience," she started. "You have something more valuable," Damon interrupted gently. "You have real-world wisdom and a heart for serving others. The initiative needs someone who understands struggle, resilience, and the power of community support." Their courtship had revealed layers of connection neither had expected. Damon joined Isla for her weekly visits to the foster children, watching in awe as she brought smiles to uncertain faces. Isla accompanied him to business functions, her quiet confidence and genuine warmth winning over even the most skeptical executives. "Remember last week at the food pantry?" Damon asked, smiling at the memory. "You organized an entire system to help elderly residents get their groceries delivered. That's the kind of practical compassion our initiative needs." Isla thought about the changes in their lives. Their relationship had grown deeper through honest conversations about fears, dreams, and faith. Damon opened up about his struggles with anxiety, while Isla shared stories of her mother's unwavering spirit during hard times. "I've learned so much from you," Damon admitted, taking her hand. "About what really matters. About seeing people, not positions." They sat together on the porch swing, watching the neighborhood come alive. Children rode bikes past the house, elderly neighbors tended their gardens, and the sense of community her mother had always cherished surrounded them. "I'll think about the initiative," Isla said finally. "But this house, Damon, this means more than I can say." "Your mother's legacy lives on in you," he replied softly. "In your kindness, your faith, your strength. I see it every day." As they prepared to leave, Damon's hand rested lightly on the small of her back. He had been planning something special, a moment that would echo their first dance, but without masks or pretense. A chance to begin again, face to face, heart to heart. The morning sun caught the gold highlights in Isla's hair as she took one last look at her childhood home, now restored and ready to shelter new dreams. In her heart she felt her mother's joy and her own future stretching bright before her. The city sparkled beneath the twilight sky as Isla stepped onto the rooftop terrace. Her breath caught at the sight before her. Hundreds of tiny lights twinkled overhead like earthbound stars, creating a magical glow across the open space. Soft music drifted through the evening air, carrying the same melody that had played during their first dance at the masquerade. Damon stood in the center, handsome in a dark suit, his eyes warm with anticipation. In his hands he held something that made Isla's heart skip, a delicate gold mask identical to the one she had worn that transformative night. "Welcome," he said softly, walking towards her. His footsteps were quiet against the rooftop floor as he approached. Instead of asking her to put the mask on, he simply held it out to her. "Hold this for me." Isla took the mask, running her fingers along its familiar curves. "It looks just like the one you wore when you changed my life." "Yes." Damon's smile was gentle. "But tonight, I don't want either of us hiding." The music swelled around them as Damon held out his hand in invitation. Isla stepped into his arms, and they began to move together, falling naturally into the rhythm they had discovered that first night. "I still can't believe you didn't recognize me sooner," Isla teased softly, her eyes twinkling. "I cleaned your office every single day." Damon laughed, the sound warm and real. "I was too busy being the blind fool who couldn't see what was right in front of him." He twirled her gently. Though in my defense, you are quite good at blending into the background when you want to. Years of practice, she admitted, then grew more serious. I spent so long trying not to be noticed. They swayed together as the city lights bloomed brighter in the deepening dusk. The mask in Isla's hand caught the glow, sending small golden reflections dancing across their faces. As the song drew to a close, Damon stepped back slightly. He reached up and touched his own face, making a deliberate gesture of removing an invisible mask. "My goddess was never in disguise," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I was." Tears welled in Isla's eyes as the full meaning of his words sank in. All those months of feeling invisible, of believing she wasn't enough. And here was Damon, telling her that he had been the one wearing a disguise all along. "The real mask was my pride," he continued, taking her free hand in his. "My fear. My walls. But you saw through them anyway, didn't you? Even when you were just quietly bringing me coffee or helping me through anxiety attacks." A tear slipped down Isla's cheek. "I never thought," she whispered, "never dreamed. Anyone could love me just as me, not as Belle, not as some magical princess, just Ela." "That's exactly who I love," Damon said firmly. "The woman who serves others without seeking praise, who brings light into dark places, who taught me what real strength looks like." The city hummed below them, a gentle reminder of the world beyond their intimate moment. Damon took both of Isla's hands in his, including the one still holding the mask. "I don't want to rush you," he said carefully. "But I know, with absolute certainty, that I want to build a life with you. Not a fairy tale, not a headline, a real life, with all its challenges and joys." His eyes searched hers. "Will you walk that path with me?" Isla felt warmth spread through her chest, a certainty she had never known before. This wasn't a hasty proposal or a dramatic gesture. This was a promise, thoughtful, intentional, and true. "Yes," she whispered, then stronger. "Yes." She stepped forward and rested her head against his chest, feeling his steady heartbeat. The gold mask dangled forgotten from her fingers as Damon's arms encircled her. Around them, the city lights shimmered like earthly stars, witnesses to their moment of quiet joy. After a long moment, Damon pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Shall we?" he asked softly, nodding toward the elevator that would take them back inside. Hand in hand, they walked across the rooftop, leaving behind the masks, both physical and emotional, that had once separated them. As they stepped into the elevator together, Isla felt the rightness of it all settle in her heart. This was no fairy tale ending, but rather a true beginning, built on the foundations of dignity, faith, and love. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.